talk about an aircraft that seems to defy the very laws of physics. A machine that is the embodiment of close air support, the Harrier. Imagine this: it screams in with the speed of a jet, yet it can stop on a dime, hover, and pivot with the delicate control of a helicopter. This isn't just an airplane. It's a combat philosophy, a weapon designed to live on the chaotic edge of the battlefield, always near the front line, ready to fight in any theater. But every theory, no matter how brilliant, needs a trial by fire. And for the Harrier, its most demanding test, where its role as a protector would be challenged as never before, was in the blazing skies of the Persian Gulf. To understand why this aircraft became so vital, we must first understand the very soul of the force that flies it. Let's transport ourselves back to late January 1991. The Persian Gulf War is entering its third week. The steel hammer of the Allied air assault has been falling relentlessly on Iraq. Saddam Hussein, his army, and his people are subjected to a seemingly endless bombing campaign. Cornered, Saddam knows he can't just wait for defeat. He needs to change the narrative, to force a ground engagement, and most importantly, to draw blood, American blood, to shake their resolve.
نريد السلام من ذلك أن يجدد أحزان أمريكا والإنسانية.
And so he makes his move. The Iraqi army launches a surprise assault in 3 places along the Saudi Arabian border. One of those targets is Khafji, a coastal town that by then was a virtual ghost town, its civilians having been evacuated. This is where the Battle of Khafji begins, and it turned out to be an incredibly fascinating situation for military analysts. What was really going on here? 2 main theories emerged, and debating them is like solving a historical puzzle together, a major attack. The first theory posits that this was a main offensive, a major effort by Saddam. The goal was to seize Khafji, score a symbolic victory, disrupt the massive buildup of American and coalition forces, and hopefully draw them into a premature and bloody ground war. A probing attack. The second, more conservative theory suggests that it was merely a probing attack. Perhaps Saddam just wanted to test the coalition's response, see how quickly they would react, and gather intelligence for larger plans. So, which was it? As we sift through the evidence over time, the picture becomes clearer. Many historians have come to believe that it was probably a major attack on his part, albeit a poorly executed one. The Iraqis marched so fast into the town that a 2-man United States Marine observation team is trapped and forced to crawl under rooftops to avoid the enemy. The Marines request air support. For 3 days, the Allied Air Command pounded Iraq with B-52 bombers and Air Force A-10s. There's another plane in this fight, the Harrier. Marines require close air support, or CUS. They want a United States Marine in the cockpit. During the conflict, the AV-8B Marine Corps attack jet flew over 3,300 sorties, averaging 2 per day, for the 86 planes in combat. The airstrikes around Khafji destroyed Iraqi tanks and artillery. For 2 days, Iraqi and Allied forces engaged in fierce and close street battles to retake the town and liberate the trapped Marines.
The great benefit for the Marines in the Harrier is that it's on station now. It is close to the battle line, minutes away instead of hours away. It's able to be there when you need it. And that's the Marine philosophy, is get the grunts on the front lines now. And those guys in the cockpits are grunts. You know, they understand the mentality of being close and being available.
Throughout the war, the Harriers are stationed in 2 places. One, a soccer stadium in Saudi Arabia, was quickly adapted to accommodate the Harriers and support troops. The Harriers are stationed so close to the action that they never need aerial refueling. Harriers are often found on ships sailing in the Persian Gulf. The main reason the Marines bought the Harrier was its versatility. This high-performance single-engine jet can do VTOL vertical takeoff and short landings. Landings do not require an arresting cable. The Harrier is a well-known jet for its outstanding ability to hover and take off from ships or small runways, which captivates audiences at air shows. The secret to its flight is a single strong engine that sends push through 4 revolving nozzles beneath its wings. The nozzles point backward in normal flight, but down while hovering or taking off vertically. When regular wing controls fail to steer while hovering, the Harrier balances using smaller jets on its wingtips, nose, and tail. However, the Harrier is known for being extremely difficult to fly, like balancing 20 tons on a needle. This was especially true for early aircraft like the AV-8A, which had a high loss rate among inexperienced pilots, known as nuggets. The early Harrier, designed and built in Britain, is indeed a difficult plane to fly, especially in a hover. But that ability to hover is the reason both the British and the United States Marines were interested in the plane. Because of its vertical capability, the plane has greater access than conventional jets and is able to operate in confined areas.
Marine Corps' mission remains what it has been for the last several decades, and that is to be the nation's force in readiness. We're the 911 force. When you call, we have the capability to respond anywhere around the world, and that's the way we tailor ourselves, and that's what we train for.
Today's Harrier pilots train alongside the Marine Expeditionary Unit, an armada of troops tanks and artillery. They cruise for 6 months at a period to the world's hotspots. The mission is straightforward. Be close and be ready to go ashore and fight. Quantico, Virginia. All Marine officers must cross this path. They spend 6 months at the basic school learning about the life of a rifleman, learning about the grunt's life. Some of these second lieutenants will become aviators. In war, they will be called upon to fight for the lives of the soldiers on the ground. Though this is as far from a cockpit as a person can get, it demonstrates that first and foremost, they are Marines. The lieutenants are cold, damp, and hungry. It's raining and muddy. They are more exhausted than ever before. They must be ready for an attack. They must dig in. Like ox.
Okay, we're going to build that parapet up in front of his aiming stake so that something can't penetrate through here and get to him. And that's what we want with all the holes.
This soft earth, sir, will be able to stop around?
No, it's going to take about 3 feet of packed earth to stop around. Okay. So you're going to have to take and occasionally pack this stuff down all the way back in order to get it to stop around.
Marine aviators first have to become qualified ground combat commanders and have to prove themselves to be capable in doing that. So they go through the basic school like every other grunt. None of the other services do that.
Hadn't showered since Sunday night.
They're out there in the freezing rain and mud, and there's a relationship that develops between the guys on the ground and the guys on the air that's based on a couple of things. One is The guys on the ground know that the Marine aviator up there in the air knows exactly what he's going through, the conditions in which he's working, and what he's trying to accomplish. And the guy on the ground knows that the guy up in the air knows what additional kinds of things need to be done to get the mission accomplished. So those two are in real close sync. The second thing is that because the Marine Corps is a small organization, there may be 8,000 captains in the Marine Corps, for example, so that the captain on the ground, when the Marine aircraft arrive overhead and somebody comes up on the net, he knows that guy. He went to basic with him. He slept out in the mud with this guy.
The United States Marine Corps is the world's only fighting force that integrates air and ground forces to this extent. The Marines have their own fixed-wing force, which includes 7 squadrons of Harriers.
If you go back far enough, the Marine Corps was faced with a dilemma, and this was kind of after Korea. We had learned that air power was a very useful tool for ground forces being able to maneuver and bring firepower to bear where they wanted it. And the most probable use of the United States Marine Corps was going to be third world countries or places we had never even heard of. And that means that it's very hard to get there. And one of the things that happened is the ground forces shed some of their artillery and said, that's hard for me to get to various places. It's also hard for me to haul around with me. But if aviation can provide the firepower that the artillery used to, then I'm free to maneuver in a lot more free fashion. We took that up, and we said, we'll do that.
There are around 400 Harrier pilots in the Marine Corps. Pilots are chosen based on their performance during 2.5 years of classroom and cockpit training. The AV-8B is a harsh airplane, and so are the rules that govern who can fly it. If your score falls below a particular threshold, you will be ineligible for the Harrier community. The Marine Corps implemented this strategy to reduce the danger of disaster. Harrier squadrons are deployed in numerous locations across the world. The Marines are the only armed forces in the United States that operate the AV-8B. Both Italy and Spain have added the Harrier to their arsenals. The Harrier is still flown by both the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force in Britain, where it was first developed. The center-borne engine, capable of producing 23,000 pounds of power, is the plane's heart and distinguishing feature.
The AV-8 is powered by the Rolls-Royce F402RR408 engine, affectionately known as the Pegasus engine. The intake is a very large intake to take in a large volume of air, especially during the vertical and short takeoff evolutions of the aircraft. To augment the large intake, we have auxiliary air doors, which are open during slow-speed flight and hovering flight, and they go around the circumference around the intake. For high-speed flight, the fan obviously has to bend a lot of air around to get to the engine face. We have what's known as boundary layer doors. They pull off the boundary layer door and allow a smooth flow of air to the face of the fan. Now we'll go back to the back of the aircraft here. You'll see what makes this aircraft special is that the vertical short takeoff capability that this aircraft has. We have 4 nozzles, 2 on each side. Towards the back is the hot nozzle. The temperatures of the hot air come out as hot as 800 degrees Celsius. This does create some bit of a problem if we have to land on asphalt. Up front is the ducted fan air. The nozzles would rotate down, and that allows the aircraft to hover and vertical takeoff, vertical landing. They all work together, and they're all worked through in one lever in the cockpit, selectable. It's just adjacent to the throttle. Pilot selectable, and they're not computer controlled. He basically controls the nozzles, puts them where he wants them, when he wants them. That's one of the other things that makes this airplane a pilot's airplane.
Throughout the 20th century, the identity of the United States Marine Corps was created in the fires of amphibious assault. During World War II, they waded ashore on heavily defended Pacific islands such as Tarawa and Iwo Jima, and later attacked the beaches of Incheon during the Korean War. In each case, Their objective was to serve as the spearhead of an invading force, establishing a foothold distant from home. This caused a critical vulnerability. As the Marines advanced inland, battling their way off the beaches, they frequently outran the huge naval guns that aided their invasion. They required immediate and overwhelming aerial firepower when confronted with enemy tanks and strong positions on their own. This exigency established Marine Aviation's mission to serve as the Marine Corps' own flying artillery, always close and ready to strike. The Harrier Jet, with its distinct qualities, became the ideal solution to this challenge. It could launch and land vertically from tiny amphibious assault ships or temporary clearings immediately beyond the front lines. This meant that it could provide virtually immediate close air assistance to troops in jeopardy. For the Marines, the Harrier was the ideal airborne artillery piece. Ironically, this was not the goal intended by its British creators. The Harrier was initially designed as a Cold War nuclear strike aircraft. Its goal was to survive a catastrophic first attack that would have destroyed all conventional airfields across Europe. The jet's innovative ability to operate from camouflaged forest clearings or stretches of road was designed to ensure that it could still take off and deliver a single nuclear warhead in a retaliation attack. However, the cataclysmic nuclear mission never occurred. The world was left with an extraordinary airplane in search of a new mission. The United States Marine Corps regarded the Harrier's potential not as a doomsday weapon, but as the ideal tool for their doctrine. They took it on and transformed it, turning the Harrier from a nuclear bomber in waiting into a legendary close air support fighter eternally associated with protecting Marines on the ground. The Marine Corps purchased the Harrier from the British in the early 1970s, and the first squadrons were established. Because the jet has a reputation for being difficult to fly, many of its top pilots transition to the newly designated AV-8A.
We handpicked the first people that went into it. The thought was, well, let's try it, let's test it, let's get 3 squadrons worth, and that will give us enough to check out the operational characteristics, because if we could make this work, it did exactly what we wanted. At the end of 3 years and no accidents, the system came back and said, you guys must have been wrong. It can't be hard to fly. Look, this is wonderful. And so instead of gradually introducing different people to it, they just opened up the floodgates. And within the next 6 weeks, we had crashed 3 airplanes and killed 2 people.
The McDonnell Douglas AV-8B is a lineal descendant of the AV-8A. The current variant, like its predecessor, features 4 movable nozzles on the fuselage that are used to vector or direct the thrust generated by the Rolls-Royce engine. The cockpit was raised, and the bubble canopy increased the pilot's visual range. The plane was outfitted with a computer-assisted response control system to assist the pilot in maintaining control.
When they redesigned the Harrier from the AV-8A to the AV-8B, a lot of the dangerous characteristics disappeared. They did engineer a great deal of user-friendliness into the airplane. It's an easier airplane to fly. It's slower. Pilots don't like losing the 80 to 100 knots that they've lost. They would rather go faster. But it can carry more weapons, and it is certainly not the puckering airplane it was before.
Now the way the Harrier works is the reaction control system essentially balances the thrust vector, which is right through the center of the aircraft. Now, if you think about it, it's all this thrust, it's kind of like bouncing on the head of a needle. Well, the way we balance that is we have reaction control air coming out of the wingtip, left side, right side, the nose, and the tail. Those are all interconnected and controlled by the stick and the rudders. For instance, if a pilot wanted to roll the aircraft to the left, he'd move the stick to the left. What would happen is air would come out of the bottom of the right wing, starting a rolling movement. Same thing holds true with the nose of the airplane. He wants to raise the nose, pulls back with the stick, which is natural for a pilot. Then the puffer duct in front of the airplane opens up, air blows down, and the nose is then picked up.
Marines and their Harriers will face the final test of their aircraft and training when they fly to combat for the first time. Harrier units and pilots, along with 90,000 other Marines, enter the war for Kuwait. Harrier pilots in the Gulf are informed they won't be involved until the ground combat begins. They will be held in reserve. Marine Corps Commanding General Boomer does not want to lose Harriers before his troops need them.
All throughout the planning, I had one major overriding fear, and that was that we would get caught or held up while breaching minefields. And while we were slowed down by these minefields, the Iraqis would use chemical weapons against us. And those chemical weapons would be fired by Iraqi artillery pieces. So my main concern was to get rid of the artillery, because my nightmare, so to speak, was being caught there and subjected to chemical weapons. So whenever I talked to our pilots, I tried to stress to them, look, taking out tanks may be a little more fun and it may be sexy, but get the artillery. We'll deal with the tanks. We can handle the tanks. What we are less prepared to deal with are chemical weapons, and they're going to be delivered by artillery, so you get the artillery.
And they did exactly that. Harriers begin their missions on the first day of the air war as Allied jets swarm the skies above Iraq.
More tired than
and
they
on
have
behalf
ever
of the
been.
troops, they go
They must
after the
prepare for an
Iraqis
attack.
with ferocity.
They
Now a
must
grunt is not
dig in.
frightened to break through a
We're gonna
breach
build
or
that parapet
barricade.
up in front of his aiming stake.
Now, a grunt is not afraid to go through a breach or a barricade. They can take on infantry, tanks, minefields, chemicals. They were not afraid of that.
Hey, George, what's up?
What they're worried about is when you breach an obstacle, you can go through it, but what it does is it channelizes you. You start putting hundreds or thousands of people through very narrow corridors that they've blown through this barricade. Well, once you've now gotten those people into a small area, that's when the artillery rains down on you, because now they've got you in a small area. And that's what scares the grunts, and that's what they were worried about. Now, unless you're attacking, moving your artillery in front of you, which may not be tactically sound, you're going to be moving away from your artillery coverage and into the heart of their artillery envelope. That's where the air comes in. We can destroy all the rocket launchers, artillery pieces, self-propelled artillery. So that was our mission. We're going to make a little t-shirt. It's called Artie Busters.
As forces prepare to attack Harrier pilots, take part in a series of raids on Iraqi artillery sites near the Kuwait border. The Harriers launch and loiter in what the Marines refer to as a wolf pack. Marine Corps EA-6 Prowlers use their electronics to jam Iraqi ground radar. Marine artillery sneaks up to the Kuwait border unnoticed due to EA-6 interference. The artillery opens fire, attacking Iraqi artillery positions. The jamming stops long enough for the Iraqis to detect the withdrawing United States artillery. The Iraqis attack, firing their weapons. And a Marine pilot in his FA-18D sees those muzzle flashes and sends the Harriers into the enemy weapons. The mission's purpose is to destroy not only the enemy's artillery, but also his morale. To warn the Iraqi soldier that any time he shoots his artillery, an Allied plane will hit within seconds. While the Harrier may drop TV laser-guided or smart bombs, the Marine Corps' preferred weapon in the Gulf is the cluster bomb, or CBU. They dump more of these than any other service combined. To complete their task, the Harriers fly low. And low is vulnerable. The Harrier has a single engine. Knock it out. Most certainly the plane is lost. A heat-seeking or infrared missile will target the Harrier around the middle of the fuselage near the rear nozzles or hot nozzles, an area of the plane that may achieve temperatures of up to 1,400 degrees F in K. Iraqi forces heat-seeking rockets target Harrier pilots in the Gulf, causing significant damage. One is Captain Craig Berriman, an Atosh.
I felt just a big thump on the side of the airplane, then heard this huge explosion, and the airplane went end over end. As I started seeing the ground rushing up toward me, and I'm thinking I'm going to have to make a decision here pretty quick as to whether I'm going to punch out of the airplane or whether I'm going to just stay with it. Now, the reason I had to make that decision is because our intel guys had given us some pretty graphic briefings as to what the Iraqis were doing to some of the Kuwaiti resistance folks, and it was not pretty. I didn't want that to happen to me, so I thought, well, maybe I'll just ride this airplane in. And the more I thought about it as I'm coming down in the airplane, I said, well, that's kind of a stupid idea.
Berriman ejects and witnesses his plane crash into an Iraqi trench line.
There was a sand dune probably a half a mile or so inland from me, and I figure if I can get over that sand dune, it'll give me a chance to pull out my survival radio, pull out my pistol, and come up with some sort of a evasion plan. As I start to run, I start seeing the sand flipping up around me as the Iraqis start shooting at me again. And I keep running. I finally get to the sand dune, and just on the other side of the sand dune was an Iraqi armored personnel carrier rolling up that I hadn't seen, and I basically ran myself into another unit.
Berriman, the United States Marine Harrier pilot, is instantly a prisoner of war and a trophy for the Iraqis.
When you land and you find out, hey, one of the Harriers didn't come home, it kind of hits in that, hey, those sparkles you're seeing on the ground, they're actually shooting at us and they're trying to kill us. And then you find that, yes, they did get somebody. You take a moment to reflect on your comrade, but then you look at what you're doing. Are our tactics sound? Are we doing delivering our weapons properly? Are we doing our job right? And you kind of look over those, and you always learn from whether it's a mistake or a combat loss, whatever it may be. And once you do that, then you just press on. It was very sad to hear about Craig. We didn't know if he was alive or not.
Berriman is brought to Baghdad, where he is detained alongside other captured American pilots. Mako.
As I'm sitting in this dark, damp, smelly cell, I can hear the Iraqis beating on a prisoner next to me. And that's probably the worst feeling I could ever imagine, just listening to somebody else being beaten, because you know that there's nothing that you can do to help them out. And probably the next worst thing is knowing that sooner or later your turn is going to come and they're going to come in and beat you. When they came into my cell, there was these two guys. One stood at the doorway holding a candle, and this other guy came over to me. And I was up in the corner of this little cell trying to protect my leg as best I could because I thought it was broken. And the first thing he did was he comes over, he grabs me, pulls me out of the corner, and kicks me in the broken leg. And it was extremely painful. And then he just starts punching on me, and I'm still blindfolded, and I'm still handcuffed, but I can kind of see underneath the blindfold. And he is hitting me so hard that I am actually seeing stars. And I always thought that, when you see the cartoon characters, when they get hit really hard, you see the stars going around their head. I always thought that was just a comical thing, but I was actually seeing stars. He was hitting me so hard.
Berriman's aim the day he was shot down was an Iraqi convoy heading toward Al-Khafji, the site of the Allies' first major fight with the Iraqis. It was a combat that revealed a lot about the Iraqi army and its soldiers. Up to?
It taught us that the Iraqis were the gang that couldn't shoot straight. They couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. We learned they couldn't, to use American vernacular, shoot, move, and communicate at the same time, and you need to be able to do those things in order to conduct a successful attack. Perhaps the most important was that we learned if you bloodied their nose in round one, they did not want to come out for round two. that they just didn't have the fire in the belly for this fight.
The Iraqi military lacks firepower. They surrendered in droves. However, Saddam will not simply leave Kuwait. The Allied invasion covers Saudi Arabia's border with Kuwait. The United States Marine Corps' battle plan calls for a two-pronged offensive to confront the enemy head-on. The United States Army will enter from the left behind the Iraqis and annihilate the Republican Guard. But when the ground conflict finally begins, the Marines move so quickly that they act as a piston driving the Iraqis north.
The day that the ground war kicked off, I flew 4 missions throughout that day, the first day, and it was pretty interesting because initially, early on, as we'd be flying up over the border, could look down and you could see just lines of logistics and tanks and Marines getting ready to go through all the breaches. And by the time I came up for my second sortie, it looked like Rat Patrol hauling butt across the desert there.
In an attempt to impede the Allied attack, the Iraqis set fire to Kuwait's oil wells. However, the winds shift and choking black smoke is blasted into the Iraqis' faces instead. The oil flames make things difficult for pilots.
This is incredible. Is it? Yeah. I'm climbing back up.
The smoke and the haze from all the oil fires, we had to get down below it. We're a visual bombing aircraft, so we really had no means to bomb otherwise without just simply dropping on a coordinate, and that's not very accurate. So we press down through the clouds, through the smoke, and once you're underneath, you're very vulnerable. It's pretty easy for a guy on the ground to pick up an aircraft that's silhouetted against a cloud cover. So that was a little bit uncomfortable feeling.
In the crucible of the Gulf War, the abstract dangers of combat flying became a visceral, terrifying reality for the Harrier pilots of the United States Marine Corps. For Captain Scott Walsh, a routine close air support mission over enemy territory transformed in a heartbeat into a desperate fight for survival. One moment he was flying under the clouds, the next a deafening explosion and a violent jolt threw his jet sideways. Inside the cockpit, a symphony of alarms shrieked as the control panel erupted into a chaotic Christmas tree of red. Amidst the flashing warnings, one light glared with deadly significance. Fire. He risked a glance over his shoulder and saw a horrifying spectacle, a furious torrent of flames erupting from his wing like a Roman candle burning out of control. In the chaos, a voice cut through the noise. A fellow Marine in a nearby FA-18 had flown in close, becoming a lifeline of calm and guidance. While there was little his wingman could physically do, his steady presence provided a crucial anchor of peace of mind. Walsh's training screamed at him to eject, but a core lesson from his father echoed louder: fuel burns and vapor explodes. Ejecting over a burning fuel tank was a gamble he wasn't ready to take. For 10 harrowing minutes, he piloted a flying inferno determined to land it. He spotted a road in the Kuwaiti desert, a potential lifeline. He rolled in for an approach, but the landing gear, mangled by the explosion, refused to deploy. The emergency system was useless. Plan B was the Harrier's signature move, a vertical landing. It was his last hope. But as he pulled the nozzle lever to direct the engine's thrust downward, the jet began to squirrel violently in the air. The missile had destroyed the right rear nozzle, creating a fatal imbalance. Adhering to the pilot's rule, if the plane does something funny, put it back, he returned the nozzles to their forward position. The realization dawned on him the aircraft was doomed. Just as he began to accept that he had to eject from a still-flying plane, the decision was made for him. The hydraulics bled out completely, the control stick froze solid, and the Harrier's nose pitched up into an uncontrollable roll. His wingman's voice screamed over the radio, "Eject, eject, eject." Walsh pulled the handle. The opening shock of the parachute was a brutal, disorienting violence, going from over 200 miles per hour to 0 in a second, folding his body in on itself and filling his vision with stars. As he untwisted, he saw a big orange fireball erupt on the desert floor below the end of his aircraft. After a rough landing, he popped his risers, and on pure adrenaline scrambled away from the wreckage, an act his squadron mates later mistook for a perfect on-his-feet landing. He was swiftly rescued by fellow Marines, his ordeal a testament to both the Harrier's vulnerability and a pilot's incredible will to survive. Other pilots faced a different kind of hell. Captain Michael Berryman was also shot down, but his story did not end with a rescue. He was captured and became a prisoner of war, his fate unknown to the outside world. Imprisoned in a building in Baghdad, he found himself on the receiving end of the very air power he once wielded. One night, he heard an intimate, terrifying sound, the click, click, click of a laser-guided bomb's fins adjusting its trajectory, heading directly for his building. It was the sound of impending death. In a moment of sheer, inexplicable luck, the bomb overshot, exploding in the parking lot outside. A massive fireball blew in through the window, filled the room with searing heat, and then sucked itself right back out. Berryman survived, drawing strength from his faith and from the nightly bombings, which he saw as a promise that his comrades were still fighting to end the war and bring them home. For 37 agonizing days, his wingman's report, a catastrophic explosion, no parachute seen, led his family and squadron to believe he was dead. The news, when it finally came, after the liberation of Kuwait, that Raz is alive, was a moment of profound relief and joy. When the dust settled, Kuwait was free. The ground war, when it came, saw the Marines advance so quickly, they acted as a piston driving the Iraqis north, even as Saddam's forces set the oil wells ablaze in a desperate failed attempt to slow the assault. Of the thousands of sorties flown by Harriers, only 5 planes were lost. 2 pilots were killed, 1 was rescued, and 2, including Berryman, were captured and returned home. Despite these harrowing experiences and the plane's controversial reputation as a widowmaker, the downed pilots remained fiercely loyal. To them and to the Marine Corps, the Harrier was unique, ahead of its time. The ground commanders in the Gulf praised it relentlessly. This unbreakable bond between the air and the ground is the soul of the Marine Corps. Pilots and grunts might trade insults in a bar, but in the heat of battle, a mystical identification connects them. The pilots depend on the ground troops to secure their forward bases, and the ground troops depend on the pilots for their very survival. This sacred trust is symbolized by a small detail the camouflage covers on the pilots' helmets. While they serve a practical purpose, their true meaning is a badge of pride, a visible declaration of solidarity with the Marines on the ground. It's a reminder that no matter how high they fly, they are, after all, Marines.